Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Rick Nineg. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about the Three Stooges, more specifically about the 77 Stooge short released by Columbia Pictures. Now, I am cataloging every single Stooge short from number 1 all the way to 190, and so we're on the 77th entry, and I hope you have seen the previous ones. If you haven't, there's a link down in the description, but this one is very pivotal. It's called Crash Goes the Hash. Why is it so important? Well, it marked the first step of Curly's decline into his really big health issues, where eventually he would leave the Stooges because of his deteriorating health. Now, as I mentioned, Crash Goes a Hash is this Stooge short, and it released February 4th, 1944. Filming took place between October 11th and the 13th of 1943. Now, I don't want to kind of put this lower on the priority list in terms of importance, because this is important, but I will talk about it first, and that is the last and final appearance of Bud Jameson. Now, if you don't know, Bud Jameson is probably one of the most well-known Stooge actors other than the main Stooges, right, that we know. I would even call him an unofficial Stooge. I mentioned him, Vernon Dent, as well as Emil Sitka as the unofficial Three Stooges, the men who are so instrumental to making the Stooges what they are today. And Bud Jameson, this was his final appearance, as I mentioned. In case you don't know, he was a type 2 diabetic in the later years of his life, and he appeared in more than 16 films after he was on this Stooge short, and he died in September of 1944. He was a devout Christian Scientist, and he died September of 44 at the age of 50 because he refused treatment for kidney cancer, and that was part of his religious beliefs. It's a difficult thing because he was so good, so funny, such a hulking big man that he just played so well next to the diminutive smaller Stooges. It was great to see. Now, in the short, the Stooges are mistaken as reporters, and they go undercover as a crook and two butlers. Why? Well, they're trying to get a scoop on Harris's engagement to a prince, and they want to make sure that they get all the information. Now, what I really want to talk about here is Curly Howard and his declining health. There's a lot of evidence here. I've talked about previous videos in which we see the beginning of his decline, like this is kind of the last of the good shorts. But now we're really in a short where we see a lot of symptoms, or we see a lot of things on camera, and I'll talk about all of those. Now, it's unfortunate to report that during the filming of this short, Curly Howard suffered one of his very first smaller strokes. He had several strokes throughout the course of his life. He had small ones, and then he had larger ones, which ultimately resulted into his deteriorating health, and finally, I guess you can say the final one, or where they just all got together and it was just too much for his body to take. But during this short is when he suffered one of these small strokes, which is super important to talk about. You can see this, there's evidence of this in the opening outdoor sequence that you can see here, which you can see Curly's face. It looks very tired, it looks disheveled, it looks very worn, and his voice is very scratchy. It's something that you can listen to yourself.
Listening to the band, love it.
Now, what's interesting with Hollywood and how the editing process works, why he looks so bad in the beginning of the short, that is because the beginning of the short was filmed basically at the end of all the filming sequences. So essentially it was filmed last chronologically. They filmed the latter parts of the episode first. And so this is why in the latter parts of this short, he is more lively. And as we continue on in the sequence and we look at the first sequence, or we look at the first part of the episode or the short, he looks very, very, very kind of run down and worn out, poor guy. So all of the other sequences were filmed on sets prior to the early stroke that he took. So that's very important to note. Not only this, but you have to remember, this is October of 1943, in the middle of World War II. There was a lot going on. And the Stooges, being patriotic and good Americans, believed that they should do something in the war effort. And so because they were entertainers, they weren't overseas fighting in the war, they were making a lot of public appearances during World War II in support of the troops and, of course, in the war effort. And so they were high demands on them. I mean, they didn't sleep a lot, and it was a big wear and tear on their body. And of course, it took a greater toll on the weaker of the three, which was Curly, because he was already having deteriorating health. And so his timing, his energy definitely began to deteriorate. You could notice it very prominently in this short. And you will notice that his speech is slightly slower. Now, he had a falsetto, which essentially means that he could pitch up his voice and do more of a this, hey, how's it going? And so that wasn't real. Essentially, this falsetto was part of his character, and his normal voice was a lot lower. And so his falsetto began to lose its essential crisp, high-pitched sound that we all grew to know and love. Now, the dialogue spoken at the lemonade table, for example, this is something that you can hear.
Yeah, folks, get your ice-cold lemonade.
It's the instance where he covertly tells Larry to take a picture of Prince Sham. You could see that Curly is talking in his normal speaking voice, and that is very much deeper than Moe's voice or even Larry's voice, and that's so atypical of him and so very different.
I think you're right. I'm starting to get chilblains.
So I hope that this sheds a little bit of light. I'm loving doing this chronology through the Stooge shorts because it's showing the slow deterioration of Curly, but it's also showing the evolution of the Stooges and their growth and their maturity throughout their almost 30 years plus of being entertainers and how they had to adjust to everything that life was throwing at them. Although it's a sad look at, Curly's decline, it is interesting to know a lot more about what was going on, what was happening to this man that we all knew and loved and continue to love. So thank you for your support as always. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and like this video. A great way to support the channels by using or going on Patreon, hitting the thanks button below. It's a great way to donate to the channel, but the best free way is by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I do appreciate it. We'll see you all next time, and don't forget everyone, always stay positive and be hopeful. Thank you to all my supporters, especially my Diamond tier patrons: Russ C, Sally N, Vito L, Citizen Kane 359, David D, Jerry D, Jennifer P, and Kevin K. If you want to join this list and be a patron supporter, it does help out so much, and I thank you ahead of time.